Well, good morning, gentlemen. Hugh Halter here. Coming to you from the Bat Cave, the kitchen of the Halter Ryebeg farm. So my wife's out working with the horse for a while. I thought we'd give this a go. We'll see if we can get through it. But we are reading out of 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 through 10 today. And this is like some rich stuff, I'll be honest with you. It's going to be about not wasting time and actually training ourselves in what is called godliness. I told you last week that I had almost chopped my fingers off in the table saw, and it's the longest I've went without hitting a CrossFit workout or doing something physical. And over there on the counter, you might see there's some cookies. I've been going off the rails and have popped on about, 8 pounds in 10 days, almost a pound a day. It's super easy to let yourself go. It is a lot harder, to try to pull the reins back in. And so it's maybe a nice segue into this passage. Let me just read it to you. It says this. It says, "I have nothing to do with godless myths or old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly, for physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise both for the present life and the life to come." This is a trustworthy statement or saying that deserves full acceptance. This is why we labor and strive, because we have put our hope in the living God, who is the Savior of all people, and especially of those who believe. Amazing words. Starts off by just going, look, stop wasting your time. I suppose we could do a word study on what speculations are, but he's basically just like, don't waste your time with anything that's not sure. Be it Bitcoin or whatever else you like to muse on and talk about and be opinionated about. It's like, don't waste any more time. If you follow Jesus, instead, get really disciplined with your life and your body and how you move in the world, what you do with your time. So that's all it is. He's going to go into a little section now about training yourself to be godly, but just, apparently there must have been a lot of guys that wasted a lot of time doing stuff that had no value. Godliness, he says, is going to give you some value for this life and the life to come. There's something eternal. So again, we see like a theme that we're to spend our time and our thinking and our money and our calendar and our best relational time on the things that have some eternal weight, not on things that are temporal. Other times he says focus on things that are unseen, not on things that are seen. So it's a classic sort of spiritual formation ideology, is that when we give our lives to Jesus, we move out of the zone of the flesh and we move into the zone of the spirit. And so if you think, well, okay, but I got to train myself to be godly, that seems like a little bit of a high bar. Is there any lily pads before we have to work on being godly? So I thought I'd give you a little bit on what that word means. Because honestly, if you hear try to be like God, you sort of tap out. You go yeah, I'm not even going to start that journey. But godly just meant to be like God. And if you go, well, who was God? Well, our scriptures teach that Jesus was God. Okay, that he was. One scripture says he is the exact representation of who God is. He is the image of the invisible God. So the God that we can't see, we were able to see into the life of Jesus, either, back then if we walked with him, and now through the stories of his life, that we can actually understand how he lived, how he talked, what he spent his time on, what he spent his time doing. And so really to train yourself to be godly just means that you train yourself to be like Jesus. And you might even go, well, that still sounds a little hard, Halter. Can we train ourselves to be like Tyler? That'd be dialing it back a few notches. Or could we train ourselves to be like Hugh, which would be really lower in the bar, okay? So if Jesus still seems hard to you, just, this might be hard to actually believe, but Jesus actually, when he would talk about us, he would, he has more belief that we can be like him than we would have belief in ourselves. He actually believes that we can. He made comments that you will do greater things than me. And we're like, are you kidding me? And sure enough, as we watch people walk in the world, there's some people that have reached more people than Jesus, and there's people that have fixed towns. I mean, people actually do amazing things. We can also be like him in our character. That's what actual spiritual formation really is. It's like the Apostle Paul said. He was talking more as a pastor one day. He said, "I'm going to stay with you guys until Christ be formed in you." So again, Paul is trying to just say, you don't have to try to be like this invisible God, amazing thing. Like, just be like the physical humanity of Jesus. And that's what spiritual formation is, until Christ be formed in you. And so we can, if Jesus walked in this way, we actually can learn how to walk that way. If he had no sin in him, we can learn to walk in the world and actually not sin like we used to. That's actually a possibility. It's not like just for the super weird mystical people. Many of us can literally stop doing the things that we were doing. So our character can change. The literal flesh to spirit, that transaction can change, where once we're ruled by our flesh, now we can actually be ruled by our spirit. Paul would say, you used to be slaves to your flesh. Now you can be slaves to the Spirit. And so for Jesus, he really believes that we can be like him. And so we have to start believing that, or we just settle for whatever it is, okay? So consider John 17, Jesus going, it was what we call the high priestly prayer. This was on his last days, actually praying for his friends. And then he's even praying for us. He said, as the Father is in me, and I have now been in you, Father. He goes through this sort of this amazing prayer where he's just going, look, I've been so perfectly related to you in the Spirit, God, that I've only done what I've seen you do. And so he goes through all this, and he says, and I just pray for them. He's praying for his disciples, that they also would have the same oneness that you and I have. So Jesus not only had a belief that we could do the things that he does and become like him in the Spirit, but that we could actually relate to the Father even like he related to the Father. So, I think when Paul's finally saying to this young Timothy guy, not only here's some ways that you can help organize and oversee the church, he's literally saying, make sure that people know, and specifically make sure that you know that you can train yourself to be a different person than you used to be. I was a brawler. I'm not a brawler anymore, okay? I haven't had a good brawl, since I decided, because of Jesus, that I would not brawl anymore. Okay, so we all have our things. Some of you might go, yeah, I used to be a womanizer. I've been married to the same woman for 30 years. Like sometimes I don't think we stop and realize what our faith in Jesus actually has formed in us. And so when you see a brother that has been married to the same woman, been faithful the whole time, but you've been out with, a different woman every month, and you go, I just can't see that I could ever be different. You actually know. You can look at Joe, go, hey, Joe did this. He pulled this off, and Joe will go, yeah, only by the Spirit. But yeah, I'm a different guy than I used to be. And so hold out hope for yourself, at least as much hope as Jesus would have. But that's what he's telling Timothy to do. So start to train yourselves. And interestingly, it says that if you will train yourself in godliness to be like Jesus, that it will hold value for both this life and the life to come. The biggest question I used to ask myself, honestly, as I was a young man, is why would I work so hard to be like Jesus? I'd have friends of mine that were doing all sorts of things that I wish I could do, and they were not in the faith, and then some were, and then they fell away, but they got to do some things that I wasn't going to do. And I used to always go, and then I'd watch them kind of come back to the Lord, and I go, yeah, but they had like 7 years of good, hard sinning, and then they just get accepted back in. So like I'd ask myself, what's the point then of working hard to be godly? And apparently he says there's incredible value. And we don't know exactly for sure, but somehow in the development that we take on spiritually here on this side of eternity, that somehow it has incredible value on the afterlife. If you thought we were just floating around on clouds kind of with harps and singing like, Bon Jovi slow songs or something like that. That's not the picture of heaven. Heaven's actually that we work. We're still working. We're still producing and doing things. So somehow maybe the character development and the spiritual development we do here really does mean something. At least for sure it would mean that Jesus would go, like, give us a thumbs up, like, well done, my good and faithful servant. Like, I think he really cares what type of people we're becoming, not just whether or not we skate in by the flames on our behind, as one scripture says, that maybe maybe it's a special little circle that we get to be in for the ones that really tried to live according to the way of Jesus. But for sure it has value for this life, guys. And I've told you, it seems like at 55, I have more of my friends falling away from, it's not so much that they're falling away from the faith, but their private lives are now coming out and they're losing everything. I just had maybe one of my top 3 friends, been in ministry his whole life, really, really good guy. I've seen him and how he parents and how he's pastored, but his wife called my wife and myself a few nights ago, and we began to see this entire secret life that's been built up alongside his normal life with other women. And he came clean. My wife said, I don't think he's come completely clean. And I was like, no, I think he did. And then last night, more stuff came out. And so I wrote this down. Sometimes you don't see the benefits of a disciplined life until you see the realities of an undisciplined life. So if you ever wonder, does it really do me any good to really stay faithful to my wife? Well, none of my friends are. Or is it really worth it for me to sort of give some of my money away to things that aren't going to benefit me or my family? Like, none of my other friends do that stuff. Whatever it might be, sometimes you don't realize the beauty of what our spiritual development creates in our lives until the realities show itself when we haven't done that. And so many of you have had friends. Remember Paul's telling Timothy, some guys have the word shipwrecked their faith. That's when you really drive the boat into the docks, or when the wheels really come off. But my friend is probably going to lose his career. He's now I tried to call him the other day, and he said, I'm spending the whole day calling my family and close friends and my 2 sons and my daughter, and I have to tell them what I've been doing. And he's like, I just don't have any energy. But he said, I want to talk at the end of this week. But, he's losing the respect maybe of his teenage boys. He's going to lose all sorts of benefits. His retirement was tied up into his ministry career, so the bennies are going to be gone. The condo that they live in out on the West Coast, the walks along the beach with his wife who used to trust him. He's now lost the trust of his wife. Not sure if she's going to be able to stick with him, but even if she does, like, they've lost a lot because of the undisciplined. And I know this guy, he really does love the Lord. He just let a part of his life take on an erotic, exotic, secret side of him, and that got way more development than the spiritual development. I once heard a guy talk about walking up a path in a mountain, and one guy is passing another guy that has 2 dogs. The guy by himself is walking down. The guy with the 2 dogs is walking up, and they get to talking, and he stops, and he asks the guy, by the way, which one of these dogs usually gets to the top of the mountain first? And he said, it's always the one I feed the most. And that's just a super simple illustration that when we're trying to move from flesh to spirit, and we're trying to become less our man and the man of Jesus, usually the one who wins is the one we feed. And that's all that spiritual formation is that when you're training yourself in godliness, you're just giving that side of your life more time. And eventually that dog is going to win, guys. And if you don't feed the dog of the spirit, then the dog of the flesh is going to win every time. It's almost a matter of what gets the most reps, who gets the most training. And so consider that. So what is training going to look like for us? Maybe consider a couple things. Obviously, training is a whole life thing, right? I've been doing CrossFit for 9 years. It's like a lifestyle, and there's times you get injured, you cut your fingers off, whatever, you travel too much, and so you get off your game, and then you get back on. It takes a little bit longer. That's more of a realistic picture of even spiritual formation. You'll be doing fantastic sometimes, and then you'll go into a dry season. So the point of training, Paul calling Timothy to this, is just don't neglect it. Like, make it, no matter whether or not you're seeing the results or not, just stay in a disciplined formation with the Lord. And so, usually what I'm thinking on are character issues. So am I developing in my character? Am I developing, secondly, in my mission? Am I doing the things in the world that Jesus was doing? And then third, I think about community. So Jesus was always trying to build this spiritual community, what he called the church. And so I think about those three things maybe as growth areas. Today I got tested on the character thing. And it was funny. Many of you know that we just got this farm, and we had originally gotten an extra 40 acres because of a very generous donation. So we were going to donate it to a gentleman that was going to help start this equine therapy that my wife would work at. Well, he apparently has had this undisciplined alcoholism in his life, and he brought his tractor up to our 40 acres. And this is just weeks before we were about to literally grant him 40 free acres of land to do the equine therapy. And he crashed his tractor on my land. And so we had to pull the lease and say, Joe, we can't give you 40 acres, bro. You got to get your life back together. And so now all of a sudden I guess we're blessed with this extra 40 acres that now Cheryl and I have to develop. And it went from a kind of a fun thing that Cheryl will get to do next to our land to all of a sudden we feel like God said, no, you guys actually have to lead this and develop this. So now it's a pretty massive financial story that we have to now raise a bunch of money to build out an equine therapy. And I had one of the guys that helped kind of fund our original story in Alton. They came through just to kind of do like a yearly checkup just to see, what God's doing in our lives. And normally it's a time where they kind of throw a little bit more resource at us. And so, we spent some time, and it was kind of interesting. They began to ask about other people that I've really gotten to know in the area. And I said, yeah, one of them is a young African-American guy that's doing an amazing work right down in Ferguson. And they said, man, we'd love to go see what he's doing. And I said, yeah, let's go do it tomorrow. So I took them to meet this guy. And as soon as we pulled up, I just remember going, they're going to give a significant gift to this kid. And a little bit of a, that thought like, I think I'm about to give my donation to this person began to come up in my mind. And I was with a few of the other teammates on our story. I think they were sensing it too, like, Halter, why are you taking a guy that's given into our mission? Why are we taking him to hear this other guy's mission? And I just remember kind of smiling at him. But and sure enough, at the end of the time, I said to my friend who was doing this mission, I said, hey, please tell Joe and Susan how much you need to finish this mission. And he said, I need $200,000. And that was actually the number that we needed to build out this equine therapy. And when we got in the car, Carol and Al start talking right in front of them. They're like, we're going to give that money to this guy. And so, we said goodbye to everybody. And then one of my team members said, so are you okay with what just happened there? And I said, yeah, I actually think it's fantastic. And he's like, well, help me because I'm freaking out a little bit. Like, we just gave our money away. I said, well, yeah, but realize this is a spiritual formation thing. I said, God doesn't just only have $200,000. God owns cattle on 1,000 hill. Like, this isn't like a one-time gift. And if we trust the Spirit of God, if we actually realize that we don't have to fear anything, if God's given us a work to do, He always provides. And we just had a great talk, and he's like, man, it's just so good. He goes, I can't believe you have that perspective. And I said, well, it's because I learned early on that I need to actually pay attention to the issues of fear in my life, especially fear related to money. And I shared that passage where Jesus is talking about, if your eye is right, the whole lamp of the body will be right. Like and so You know, I said early on, I feel like God's always tested us financially, like whether or not we would be generous with all the things God has given. And so, yeah, I said, I think early on I had to learn how to get my eye right, like that God would keep entrusting us with more. The more our eye was right, the more we weren't tied up in fear, or as we were growing in generosity, we knew that we could never outgive God. And I said, so the fact that they have committed to give $200,000 to this amazing young man doing an incredible work, I said, I rejoice in that. And then I just smile at the Lord and I go, look, you know, I'll trust you. Whatever you want to do for us, we'll do. So I also said, the benefit of not getting money, by the way, is that you don't have to do the work. I said, when the money comes, you got to do the work. So I said, if the money doesn't come into our hands, then I'm going to chill out for a while. And so we just had a great laugh. He said, yeah, you're right. He goes, I don't know if my eye is right yet. I think I'm still a little bit too fearful or a little bit greedy. So maybe some of you need to do some work on a character issue. It could be fear, it could be lust, it could be materialism. That's usually the first place. Most men start is usually with an inner life character issue. If you feel like you're solid on some of that, then you might go, how's my life of mission? Am I being spiritually formed in actually the activity of mission in the world and helping those that Jesus really seemed to want to help the most, usually those in poverty or some type of marginalized state. And then finally, maybe it's related to community, your commitment to the community of faith, could be your commitment to the family, could be anything like that. And so maybe one of those three areas we can start talking about and working on. But for sure, this is a trustworthy statement, guys, for sure. You will receive what we call the double bennies. We used to call it the triple bottom line or the double bottom line. You will never lose if you focus on a disciplined, godly life. You will almost only win. And obviously God will get the glory and God will be pleased, but you will win. Your life will be far more rich, far more whole, and you won't lose nearly as much as you would lose if you live an undisciplined, godless life. So hopefully that helps. All right, we'll see you.